very pleased to be here and having the opportunity to talk about the case we built for Media-Saturn. Some of you might have seen this before. I hope to be able to explain a little bit about what it is, what we did, and also about what we learned, and maybe some suggestions of what we can do in the future to build good VR experiences. So first of all, let me introduce myself and us. Oops, that was fast. Too fast. Yes. So we are Innoactive. We are a company from Munich, based out of Munich, as we can see in the background. We are specializing in digital transformations, and specifically in the area of VR and AR, in its application in commerce. So anything that has to do with sales and marketing, that's our thing. That's where we are focusing our efforts on, because we think this will really revolutionize how people will buy products. So that was a very cool lead-in, actually, what Marcus just said about Audi cars. I think they're doing a really, really amazing job there and really pushing the edge of what's possible. We really enjoy seeing cases like this. These are some of the companies we are working for. We're very fortunate to work on very, very challenging and also very interesting projects. So I hope to be able to show a little bit about what this case was. So this is a video about it. I'll just let that run real quick. It explains a little bit about what the idea was.
Selling consumer electronics is a lot about experience, and therefore virtual reality is a big opportunity to give our consumers a complete new shopping experience in a much better way than just browsing it online, and therefore we decided to build the virtual showrooms into our stores. After our decision to launch a virtual showroom, the biggest challenge was to find the right innovative partners, Kiveda and Innoactive, and we really enjoy working with them together and also get some more industry partners who are also very innovative and work with us on this project.
Kiveda is the fastest growing seller of kitchen in Germany. We are selling over 1,000 kitchens every month, and so we understand the demand of the kitchen buyers in Germany. Virtual reality is the perfect instrument to make this experience great for the consumer.
We think we can really revolutionize how retail works. You just need 3 by 3 meters to display whatever product you would like to show to your clients. So that saves a lot of cost. On the other side, it creates so much more possibility in terms of portfolio of product you can have.
It's super exciting what Media-Saturn is doing with virtual reality. They are offering a super high quality experience, very interactive, very flexible, that really immerse people into the ability to create their kitchen of their dreams.
And I'll cut it here because, unfortunately, we had a very bad actor coming afterwards. So it's not so pleasing to watch. Anyway, so the idea was, first of all, trying out virtual reality in a point-of-sale scenario. So not really releasing it into the wild, into Media-Saturn stores, and finding out how customers are going to react to having the opportunity to use a VR headset to experience products. Obviously, the major upside is we can virtualize products which could formerly not be there. So in that case, there was entire kitchens. The idea was basically it was a combined project, also with kitchen partners. As you saw, Kiveda, it's a kitchen startup, and there were also real kitchen products in there. So we had products from AEG, from Bosch, and from Siemens inside. It was launched originally in October last year, so that's why you see a dev kit. So we actually went live with the first couple of dev kits. We didn't even wait until we had the real consumer version of the Vive. It's live in 2 markets as of now. We have done a lot of testing, and now there are some future plans about how to roll out this topic of VR. I'll try to disseminate this a little bit to give you guys an overview of what it meant to build this project. So essentially, this is where we started out. We started out about 2 years, maybe, right about now. As you see, this is a very beautifully faked photo of what the user experience should be. Essentially, what we did back in the day, we had mobile VR headsets, and we tracked, so that was before the Vive, we tracked full body of the user. We could do that for multiple users, actually, with a depth sensing camera. In that case, was the Kinect. And at the same time, we gave a spectator view of what's going on inside the scene. So that was back in the early days. Obviously, we had a lot of restrictions here, but I brought a small video to show what that looks like. So as you can see, in that case, it was with the Samsung Gear VR. Just put that headset on. You were pairing yourself with the system, and then essentially you got a virtual avatar without wearing anything. And you could move around with this inside this freely. You could actually do this for multiple users, and they could see each other and actually shake their hands. And at the moment where they were shaking hands in virtual reality, they were touching in real reality. So that was always a very freaky moment for most people. Then we took it a bit further, because then obviously the idea was using the Vive and using a professional setup that could last thousands of users. So we already had, last number I checked was above 2,000 people in there. I think there are a lot more now. And we essentially built an entire setup that could last that, and also that could attract more people. That where the main challenge was, how does a point-of-sale setup look like to attract a lot of people to it, and that they want to try it out. This is what we eventually ended up with. It was a two-tower setup, which has opportunity to put out 4 monitors inside. So we could, and they're basically rotating on 2 axes, so you could put that in any configuration. The bridge on top was to be able to guide the cable from the top, and also it was to have the sync cable, because back in the day you couldn't, the lighthouse trackers, if you know what I mean, they couldn't be synced unless you had a wire. Good. So showing you the user experience, I had planned to bring a live demo, which we couldn't connect, unfortunately, but we will bring that outside afterwards. This is a quick video of what the user experience is inside. Hopefully, it is. There you go. Can you guys turn down the volume a little bit? So as you can see, you could teleport around in this. You could interact with the kitchen itself, open and close cupboards. You could actually change between a couple of different locations inside the apartment to look at the kitchen from different angles. And this is all Vive-based, so this is room scale. You can move around in this freely as well. And then you had a couple of different kitchens that you could select. And you would teleport into that new space. This was your user interface in order to be able to change colors, change materials. So different from the case you just saw from Audi, inside here the user was actually doing the configuration himself. And then there was a kitchen supply or kitchen consumer goods space, so a kitchen space that allowed you to basically browse through an infinite amount of ovens, fridges. In that case, it wasn't infinite actually, just 30 models in there. And you could actually browse through them similar as you would be doing that on the website, and choose the different devices that you would like to have in your kitchen. And then when you teleported back into the kitchen, you would actually see them there. You could check out whether you like them. If you don't like them, go back into the kitchen showroom, choose other devices. And you would also get all the information from the devices inside that room, so you could actually find out how energy efficient they are and everything else, their price. And as I said, I wanted to talk a little bit about what we learned. And we learned a lot of things about this. First of all, if you are a software company, and we are a software company, building hardware is really difficult. We built a lot of prototypes to get to the place. We actually had about 5 to 6 iterations from different tower designs until we ended to that point. And those installations actually turned out to be huge and very, very hard, very heavy, very hard to transport, very hard to assemble, a lot of things. But they did what they had to do. They lasted, and they're still lasting. So that was definitely something that we now learn to do a little bit different. In terms of 3D content, we also learned there are processes inside the companies, similar to what Audi just said, which sounded very easy to just use the 3D models that they have. Most of the time, most companies don't have processes for this. So when they release a CAD model from whatever they have, it takes ages to be going through different restrictions until somebody gives permission to hand that out. And that's a lot of time invest and also organization invest that you have to do. So I think from the customer side, from the company side, they have to think and start thinking about how do they actually release these 3D models in the future so that they can actually share them easier and that you can actually have a real-time ready model maybe even from the get-go. Another thing that we learned the hard way was the user interface. Obviously, since we were developers, what we did, we had the 2 controllers that came out with the Vive, and they had a lot of buttons. So what we did is we put one functionality on every single button, so they could do so many things at the same time, and it turned out to be really bad as well. Because if you had that in your retail location, then people try and they just press any button. And if every time you press a button, something else happens, nobody understands the user interface. So we ended up actually redoing and reiterating that user interface a lot as well, until we arrived at the one that we have in the end. And lastly, the level of realism was also a challenge. Turns out inside VR, if you are trying to achieve something very, very photorealistic, then you cannot have dynamic lighting. You have to be very, very specific about restrictions. So you have to be very, very much concerned with what can I move and what can't I move, so that the entire scene looks realistic, basically. Now, in terms of other learnings, we had a survey done inside this showcase, and we had it done for about 200 participants. And they were asked a number of questions, actually, and I didn't put all of these in the slides. But essentially, we found a couple of key questions here. And on the left, you see it was actually rather young audience. So we had a great part being from 16 to 25 and 25 to 40. But still, we've got a lot of insights we're really happy about. For instance, a lot of people are actually comfortable wearing that headset. That was one of the concerns in front of other people, because you might think that they think they are afraid to be the fool, like jumping around with a headset in front of other people, and turns out most people don't care. Especially after the first try that they did it, they don't care anymore. They just put it on, they love it, they want to do it. Another thing that we learned is about 8% of people actually still got motion sick, and although we had 90 frames per second and we had our 20 milliseconds latency. When I say motion sick, I don't mean I mean they just were maybe a little bit dizzy, right? So, and the other thing that was really interesting for us was they actually could imagine themselves buying products over this. So there were a lot of, especially males, by the way, they love this medium. They love the way to interact with products this way. They love the way of being able to have an infinite amount of choices. And turns out a great majority was actually in favor of being able to buy something over this at some point. And then also something that surprised us actually was the idea that people love to create their own space. So if they were given the opportunity to create a space just personalized to them, they would really, really be excited about that. Something else that we learned, I mean, that was a quite general survey, so it wasn't just about our experience, but a lot of general things. These are like the top 5 things people loved and the top 5 things people didn't like. In our experience specifically, they loved the level of realism, so we think in terms of everything that has to do with retail, similar to what you just heard, there's a great deal of realism required, because only if you can feel that this product is actually a real representation of what you could buy, then you could actually feel comfortable buying it. Obviously, the latency is something that people just got excited about, so there's actually a mixture between the actual experience and the technology itself. Also, they're quite happy about moving around in this freely, because that just gives a level of immersion. They feel they're actually there, and they like to be actually bodily involved. And something else beyond graphics, that was the actual user interface design. They like that as well. They like the interactions. They like the actual principle of moving around. And on the other side, that was actually mostly about the headset itself. They were still critical about the resolution. When I say they were, it was about 27% of people mentioned that the resolution is not so nice. The device used in that case was the HTC Vive. But anyways, they were very, very much amazed about that the possibility is already there. And then moving forward, I'll share a couple of, and when I say a couple, just a couple of best practices, because it turns out we are still learning. We are still very much in the process of making more and more experiences, and with each and single one, we get to some new point where we thought we knew what we were doing, and we turned out we don't. Some things that worked pretty well in here were the teleporting. So the idea was that you could move around in a huge space, obviously, entire house, essentially. And what we did, basically, we had the short circle around you, so the near space. This we allowed people to just discover by walking around and going close to items. And then we had teleporters, which they could just click onto, and that would take them further distances. And that turned out to be something that people understand really, really fast. In terms of simplicity, the user interface is really, really very simple. Essentially, you have one button to press. And I think, sometimes I actually think even one button might be too much. But in that case, most of the time it actually works quite well. It's like your mouse. So we have a laser pointer, as you saw in the video. You just click on the things that interest you. And it's a similar motion. It's the trigger button in the Vive controllers. So that actually helps people to understand the thing really quick. And also, we got a great feedback about that they love this kind of user interface because it feels very natural. Something else that we found out is it's really important to make these experiences, although they're realistic and everything, and the movements are restricted so that people don't get sick. That's, by the way, another point for teleporting. If you teleport and don't just, move the entire house around you, people have a direct cut. And that helps them not to get motion sick as well. Because I'd imagine if you teleport from here to there and you have some kind of transition effect, then that actually gets people, maybe that looks cooler, but that turns out that actually gets people sick. Then also from making it fun, it has to be something engaging. Maybe is a good point to put some mini games in there. Maybe a chopping board where you can chop your virtual cucumber or something. That actually engages people. And what we did, actually, we had a lightsaber Easter egg in there, and people actually tried that out, and they loved it. And then for the hardware installation, we also learned a huge hardware installation is not very practical in most senses, because it turns out most retailers don't have a huge space to dedicate to VR at the beginning, at least. And they need something that they can also maybe move around inside their space when they decide to put it somewhere else. And it obviously has to be a lower upfront investment as well. So we actually evolved in that point of sales hardware infrastructure that we use now. So this is another creation of ours. We actually find out we needed a space to actually put the headset, right? We didn't think about that at the beginning. We need a place to store, to charge the controllers. So that's all integrated here now. We still think that it makes a lot of sense to have a display for everybody that doesn't wear a VR headset. We think it makes a lot of sense to have that as high resolution as you can. So we actually have a second computer that just generates 4K for the spectator view, so to speak. That setup actually works with a couple of different users as well, so we don't have to just use one. Obviously, thinking about all of these things, thinking about how to use something in retail, we also were very excited to know what's happening inside these experiences. So we're using analytics now. We know where people have looked at, for how long, where they walked at, where they stayed for a long enough time. And then something else we came up with in that process is we realized that we have to do a lot of demos. And then also in terms of retail, there are some scenarios, let's say there's somebody that tries to sell airplanes. He cannot just always bring his client into the store. Maybe he brings the store to them. So therefore, we created a VR suitcase that's actually available for sale now, for 3 days now. And actually, we brought that with us so you guys can try out the demo of the kitchen demo of the Kiveda case outside. The idea here is basically to bring an entire setup of a room scale environment with you, and you can set it up within 3 minutes. Yeah, so much for that. I'll actually like to end with a small session of Q&A if you have any questions. Can recommend you guys to check out the panel that Martin Wild is talking on about deployment of VR solutions, and also have a small workshop about virtual and augmented reality in commerce scenarios coming up tomorrow, as far as I know. So thank you for your attention, and happy to answer any questions if you have.